Hey everyone, and welcome to our first background building video. These videos will typically run through the story of a character from before the campaign, and the things you want to accomplish in the game, and the things you want the character to go off and do once retired. When speaking about races or a particular type of character, i.e. a fighter, we will consider the stereotypes involved and also the ways to show off the uniqueness of your class or race. These will be helpful for those of you hoping to play a specific race or character and inspire thoughts of how you can better incorporate your character into the game you will be playing. Additionally, for the creative writers out there, consider how making a character in your story can be affected by these same factors. Without further delay, this week's character is Slish Emanekaf, the Scummy Swordsman. The basics. Slish's traits. Slish is at his core a few obvious things, and these shape the way the character is given a story. These few defining features are that Slish is racially a dragonborn, class-wise he is a fighter, his archetype is champion, and his background is performance gladiator. You can choose to lean on these as much or as little as you like. However, it is important to consider that these same traits will be what the other players and NPCs come to expect from your character. Race: Dragonborn. Ah, a Dragonborn. You must love power, riches, and probably have an uncontrollable need to burn things. Or maybe you're wise and cunning. You plan your life to always be the victor. Ah, no, I see it now. You're a man of solitude, a loner of sorts, the outsider of society, and the guy who'll do the dirty work. Well, maybe those aren't your ideas of a Dragonborn. But that's what people think of you. Sometimes that perception of what you might be can often shape who you are. But this perception can also be flipped to show a uniqueness about you. Now, assuming you are in a non-metagaming atmosphere, the chances are your race is the only feature you'll have to constantly re-establish. The following things require deeper insight into your character in-game, and as such, often you will establish the correct story before someone assumes the stereotypical things about you. However, still consider whether you'd want to incorporate the stereotypes that follow to help create your story. Class: Fighter. Ooh, a fighter. Well, which are you? You're the tough front line? The guy who sticks through it with your allies and takes the hits? No, no, you look more like the badass. The guy who's ready to throw himself full throttle at an enemy till it falls before you. Wait, I got it. You are the master. The commander. You set the forces out and you make the tactics. Not one of those? Are you just a simple soldier? Or a citizen who took up arms to protect themselves? Well, let us check your archetype to see a little bit more about you. Archetype: Champion. Oh, a champion! Of course, I see it now. So you are sure you aren't the guy who is slashing away full tilt? Okay, so then you must be the champion who is always maneuvering the combat in your favor, waiting till someone's defenses are down and then you strike, or slowly withering down your enemy till he is too weak to stop you and your party. Maybe you are still training to be this blade master and that is why you are unsure. Background: Gladiator. Yeah, now we're getting there. You're a gladiator. It all makes sense. You're going to weaken your foes in and out of combat. Fight fair, but fight cautiously, always keeping your wits about you. You may be an honorable fellow who despises the thought of underhanded moves, or maybe you're just that brute that gets thrown into the worst of it and somehow digs himself out. Or maybe that's your past. Maybe now you are nothing like the man who spit out those men in the pits. Maybe you have since turned your back on the things you learned and are taking on a new profession. Breaking the mold. Ah, you are not any of those things? What? That's not possible. Well, It is possible, right? What I just ran through is the ideas that players and NPCs often get from your background. These are the ways that the books say to do things, the way you're expected to act based on the tools these things provide. However, often playing to the opposites can create a rather interesting character. But do keep in mind that everywhere you go and many people you play with will always have these preconceived ideas of what your character is. Maybe that is how you want to play, but do consider that sometimes making that fighter who only uses his bow once, and he's a champion and he stalks outside of combat, but he has three attacks, but he only uses one, it can get a little ridiculous. Sometimes the answer to wanting to play a character who breaks the mold is playing a character who fits a different mold. Level equals lore. One of the things that you can rarely avoid is the effect of leveling. If you are a level 1 character, you are not a Kingslayer. You have done nothing epic. In no way should you make a character without considering the level of the campaign or setting you'll be in. The only thing that a character who breaks these rules does is ruin the story and role playing. Now, I'm not saying to never play that Dragon Slayer Barbarian. Ooh, but just simply play him in a game he belongs in, and it makes sense that he has a dragon scale mail piece. As a whole, just consider that your story has to make sense with your character's sheet. If you want an epic moment and a great backstory for a level 1, that's fine. But make the scale of epic equal to the level. Level equals lore. Yeah, a story about killing an intruder who just killed your parents is not something that you can go to an inn and boast about. But in a level 1 campaign, that's something to give your character a courageous story to tell to the other nobodies in his party. You want to have a royal? Fine. But make him the prince's second son who has to prove himself. Most importantly, make your story make sense. While you may feel the pressure to compete with your other players for cool stories or even in some cases character power, just remember that no one enjoys that player. And at the end of the day, you want to make a fun story together rather than focusing on the stories you bring to the dinner table. Personal flavoring. Now that we have addressed some of the background effects on your character, let's talk about what you want this character to be. In my mind, I always wanted Slish to have a hard past, a confusing adulthood, and a simple ending. I wanted Slish to embody the idea of this broken person, lost in life, somewhat naive to the things around him. Part of choosing his background was in line with this thought process. However, this could have been achieved without pulling from any of the effects we have just discussed. Beginning. The story before the story. As I mentioned previously, I had an idea of what I wanted Slish to be like, and in order to achieve that, I needed to create his past in accordance with the goals of making him naive, broken, and too busy to learn. I did this by making Slish a gladiator ever since he was big enough to stand up. Not only was his gladiator life something that would keep him from experiencing the world or understanding normal interactions of people, but it also made it so he was an orphan, and this orphan was only being taken care of by his master so he could make money off of him. Ultimately, this being the first 16 years of Slish's life, gave him good reason to act and feel like an outsider in the real world. In the end, Slish is essentially fired from his job as a gladiator because his master can no longer find anyone willing to fight him. This new-found freedom and lack of any idea what to do will lead into our midlife story, or in the D&D side of this, this is where you would be joining your campaigns and one-shots. Midlife, the campaign integration. So this section will cover how your interactions as Slish would go in a campaign or one-shot setting. For those thinking of this character in a storytelling manner, consider this a period of mixed jobs and hobbies that Slish would do to feel out what he's meant to be. In both a story and your D&D game, Slish would be very 50-50 on all these things. While he may excel at certain things more than others ultimately, he will find that most tasks are unsatisfying and often He is merely there to get paid. When I play Slish, I often make him a semi-functioning alcoholic. Often he's doing these jobs just to get paid so he can go down to the bar and spend it all on ale, women, and food. Part of the reason for doing this is to show his attempts to cope with life by drowning himself in the pleasurable things, but it's also to pull on his dragonborn heritage. His lack of interest in jobs is often due to his inability to grasp the greater goals or the ease at which he can excel at a job he never even knew existed. Kind of a balance between the boringness of a job you can complete too easily and the confusion that a job too complex can cause. Eventually, this period will come to close with a final job where he finally connects for the first time. He understands the reason for doing these missions. He finally sees what everyone previously had been talking about, and he becomes very close with his party. Maybe he falls for someone, and he wants to live his life with them. Maybe he loses this person and cannot fathom continuing his mission. Finale. The retired character. In this final part, you'd be leading Slish to his lazy ages. Maybe that last mission doesn't go so well, and he loses a party member which forever haunts him. Maybe he succeeds in his mission, and gets a reward so plentiful that he decides to end his time adventuring. Whatever the case may be, you now have in the story a man who had a rough childhood, began his life at 16 knowing very little, and trying to drown out his feelings with any pleasure he could find. This man then proceeded to see the world jumping between job and job, until finally he knew he had seen enough, and he was a bit remorseful for wasting all those years he did. In my mind, this screams for retirement in which Slish is doing the best to make up for lost moments. Maybe you find it suitable for him to settle down with another old soul, and he lives out a simple life, enjoying children and grandchildren and the like. Alternatively, you could have him orchestrating these missions, and now offering the money to allow these missions to be completed by younger adventurers. The final thought, and the way I particularly would have Slish's career come to a close, is as such. Slish was never known as an honorable man, and very few people he ever met would describe him as a mentor. But somehow, that's where he ended up. Maybe his childhood was what inspired him to do what he did. Maybe a lifetime of being lost in his mind in a world he failed to grasp was what made him want to help others. Or maybe he just liked being the best at something once again. Either way, Slish's training would come to bring up many proud and honorable fighters. The children who he trained in this arena would come to know him as Slish the Sensei, though most did not even know what the word sensei meant. Sure, you could still find Slish at a bar on the weekend, and yeah, he still enjoyed to drink, but rarely in excess. A modest man with a modest purpose, Slish would walk home from the bar on a starry night and look into the sky. No one ever knew what he was staring at. Some just assumed a drunk man will be as a drunk man is. But to Slish, that time between the bar and his house were some of the most treasured moments. For when the sky was clear and the stars bright, it is told that lost lovers can whisper through the cosmos to one another. And that, everyone, is Slish. Hopefully this background building session was helpful, and if you liked what you saw, please share the channel and consider leaving a like. It really helps the channel grow. These background building sessions will be heavily influenced by the wants of the community, so please provide suggestions and give feedback on things you'd like to see. StoryCores aims to be the #1 channel for fostering creative storytelling and for finding inspiration to make your own stories come to life. Have a wonderful day, and please subscribe if you want to see more content. Thank you, and rest easy, young wanderers.